Chapter 61. Luli. That night neither of them slept. Luli was too jittery, nervous that the mercenaries would give chase. She had commanded the compass to lead them to a hiding place, and it had brought them to a plateau overlooking the sand sea. It was there that they waited for Kadir. All the while, Luli cursed herself for forgetting their supplies at the oasis. The loss of her merchant apparel made her inwardly and physically shudder. The desert was freezing, so cold she burrowed herself into the prince's side without even thinking to ask for his permission. The prince didn't seem to mind. He was either too numb or too cold to care. They sat there like that until the sun rose and Kadir appeared on the horizon, a lone figure walking toward them. It was a relief to see their bag of supplies slung over his shoulder. Luli wrapped her arms around herself and stood to meet him. What happened? She had to clench her teeth to keep them from chattering. The rumors say a magical fire burned through the sook. Kadir paused before her. Even at a distance, he exuded a warmth that thawed the chill in her bones. Apparently, though, it looked real. It was nothing but a mirage. Imagine that. Kadir reached out to touch her frayed curls. Your work, I assume? She managed a weak smile. What, you think a mercenary would cut it for me? I suspect even a mercenary would make a cleaner cut. His gaze softened as he turned to look at the prince, who had not moved. Kadir snapped his fingers and a fire burst to life in front of him. The prince sidled closer to it. Once Luli had donned her warmer merchant layers and they were all seated in front of the fire, Kadir told them what he'd learned. Shortly after being spotted in Medine by commoners, Prince Mazen had been locked in his chambers indefinitely by his father. The act had garnered sympathy, or perhaps understanding, for what the prince had done next. He turned some of the royal soldiers, staged a coup, and stuck a knife through his father's heart. Prince Mazen looked like he could barely sit upright. Those are no royal soldiers, he shuddered. They're my brother's thieves. I overheard Aisha talking about them. He looked up, glassy eyes locked on them in desperation. My brother, he said weakly. What of Hakim? Kadir grimaced. There was no news of Prince Hakim. He seems to have vanished in all of the chaos. He turned to look at Luli. Since the coup was mostly contained to the palace grounds, I trust Dahlia is safe. Luli managed a weak nod. Dahlia was a woman of the black market. If she needed to escape, she would use the underground tunnels. But there was still another person whose fate Luli did not know. When she tried to lock gazes with Kadir, he turned away, hesitation embedded in the furrow of his brow. Luli's heart hammered in her chest. There was nothing she could do to prepare herself for his next words. Ahmed bin Walid is dead, he said. The words hit like a hammer. Luli swayed. It felt as if the world had been pulled out from beneath her feet. She had to place a hand on the ground to balance herself. His body was found by the palace gates, Kadir continued. The rumors vary. Some say the Wali led the prince's uprising. Others say he was helping palace staff escape when he was ambushed by soldiers. He died with a blade in his hand, a warrior to the very end. Luli stared at him numbly. No. She did not realize she was digging her nails into her palms until Kadir reached forward and gently uncurled her fingers. He clasped her shaking hands in his. The normally comforting heat of his skin barely warmed her. Luli couldn't stop shivering. The prince fidgeted. I think Ahmed knew something was off the moment he saw me in dime. He hung his head. I believe he suspected Omar of scheming and tried to stop him. If the words were meant to comfort her, they failed. She could not stop reliving her departure from Dime, could not stop seeing the melancholy smile on Ahmed's lips. She remembered the way he'd kissed her hand and the words he'd said to her. And we shall finally talk, lovely Luli, of stars and stories. A stray tear slid down her cheek. 1, 2, and then she was sobbing, her body shaking with the force of her tears as Kadir wrapped an arm around her. He pulled her toward him. She felt empty, as if some piece of her heart had been smashed. She had taken Ahmed bin Walid for granted. He had seemed immortal, a charismatic, well-liked hunter, a hero to some. How could such a man be gone, without ceremony, without so much as a goodbye? Grief shattered the rest of her thoughts, and Luli buried her face in Kadir's shoulder as she cried. She wept until her throat was hoarse and her tears had run dry, and then she let rage consume her sorrow. Wallowing in grief would accomplish nothing, but fury would help her burn a path forward, and at the end of that road, if she was persistent, there would be vengeance. For her family, for Ahmed, for her. She peeled herself away from Kadir and glanced at the prince. She saw her emptiness reflected back at her in his eyes. He was a victim now, same as her. And just like her, he could prove he'd been underestimated. She turned to Kadir. What happened after the takeover? Kadir's mouth twisted into a grimace. The prince fled. Rumors say that the Sultan's council has assumed control of the city until Omar returns. If what Prince Mazen says is true, then the current army is probably being led by Omar's thieves. Luli frowned. If Omar hasn't gone back, then he's searching for Ifrit magic, the prince said. Kadir sighed. Then he will be looking for the lamp. I doubt Aisha bint Luas came all this way just to keep you from returning to the city. The prince flushed at that, but said nothing. Luli crossed her arms. Well, at least we know why your brother sent you on this journey, Prince. He deserves to die, the prince said quietly. There was an unnatural stoniness to his expression as he said the words, a deadly calm that was so unlike him it made her cringe. He looked up at her with bloodshot eyes and said, There's no need to call me Prince anymore. He wrapped his arms around his knees and stared blankly into the fire. Luli frowned. Do you mean that? About your brother? Because I don't want you to object when I stick a blade through his throat. I'd kill him myself, but He shook his head, swallowed. Why should I stay? You're no longer obligated to drag me along. You don't even need to look for the lamp. She bristled at the morose look on his face, at the defeated slump of his shoulders. Luli and I were trapped the moment your father forced us into this quest, bin Malik, Kadir said, voice gentle. We do not have the luxury of running, even now. Your brother will eventually find his way to the lamp, and I do not intend to let him take one of my old comrades. You could join us, Luli said. We're probably the only ones in the desert who won't turn you in for the reward. Mazen eyed her warily. How will you find the lamp? You don't even know where it is. Luli scoffed. You're forgetting we have Kadir, who can burn holes in the sand. Kadir held up the compass, and a compass that can locate anything. The compass and Kadir. She had never thought it would be so simple. Once Kadir had told her the Sultan underestimated them. She could still remember her response. He'll regret threatening us. Now she made another promise. We'll make your brother regret this. I swear it. Their enemy had changed, but their goal was the same. Find the lamp, outwit a corrupt noble. Luli was going to make Prince Omar suffer. She had lost everything because of him. Now she would take everything from him. She would destroy him so thoroughly not even ashes remained. She stood and held out a hand, and after a few long moments, Mazen took it. Come, Kadir faced the desert with a grim smile. The lamp awaits.